Dracula, Chapter 18, Dr. Seward's Diary, 30th of September. I got home at 5 o'clock, and found that Godalming and Morris had not only arrived, but had already studied the transcript of the various diaries and letters which Harker and his wonderful wife had made and arranged. Harker had not yet returned from his visit to the carrier's men, of whom Dr. Hennessy had written to me. Mrs. Harker gave us a cup of tea, and I can honestly say that, for the first time since I have lived in it, this old house finally seemed like a home. When we had finished, Miss Harker spoke. "Dr. Seward, may I ask a favour? I want to see your patient, Mr. Renfield. Do let me see him. What you have said of him in your diary interests me ever so much." She looked so appealing and so pretty that I could not refuse her, and there was no possible reason why I should, so I took her with me. When I went into the room, I told the man that a lady would like to see him, to which he simply answered, "Why?" "She is going through the house, and wants to see everyone within it," I answered. "Oh, very well," he said. "Let her come in, by all means, but just wait a minute till I tidy up the place." His method of tidying was peculiar. He simply swallowed the flies and spiders in his little boxes before I could stop him. It was quite evident that he feared or was jealous of some interference, and when he had got through his disgusting task, he spoke quite cheerfully. "Let the lady come in." And he sat down on the edge of his bed with his head down, but his eyelids raised so that he could see her as she entered. For a moment I thought that he might have some homicidal intent. I remembered how quiet he had been just before he had attacked me in my own study. I took care to stand where I could seize him at once if he had attempted to make a spring upon her. She came into the room with an easy gracefulness, for which would at once command the respect of the lunatic. For easiness is one of the qualities that mad people most respect. She walked over to him, smiling most pleasantly, and held out her hand. "Good evening, Mr. Renfield," she said. "You see, I know you, for Dr. Seward has told me of you." He made no immediate reply, but eyed her all over intently, with a set frown upon his face. This look gave way slowly to one of wonder, then merged into doubt, and then, to my intense astonishment, spoke. "You're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you? Well, you can't be. She's dead." Mrs. Harker smiled sweetly. She replied, "Oh, no, I have a husband of my own, to whom I was married before I ever saw Dr. Seward, or he me. I am Miss Harker." "Then what you doing here?" "My husband and I are staying on a visit with Dr. Seward." "Don't stay." "Oh, but why not?" I thought that the style of conversation might not be pleasant for Miss Harker any more than it was for me, so I joined in. "How do you know that I wanted to marry anyone?" His reply was simply contempt, given in a pause in which he turned his eyes from Miss Harker to me, instantly turning them back again. "What an asinine question!" "Oh, I don't see that at all, Mr. Renfield," said Miss Harker, at once championing me. He replied to her with as much courtesy and respect as he had shown contempt to me. "You will, of course, understand, Miss Harker, that when a man is so loved and honoured as our host is, everything regarding him is of interest in our little community. Dr. Seward is loved not only by his own household and by his friends, but even by his many patients, who, being some of them hardly in any mental equilibrium, are apt to distort the cause and effects, Since I myself had been an inmate of a lunatic asylum, I cannot but notice that the sophistic tendencies of some of its inmates lean towards the errors of non causa and ignorato elenchi. I positively opened my eyes at this new development. Here was my own pet lunatic, the most pronounced of his type that I had ever met, with talking elemental philosophy, and with a manner of a polished gentleman. I wondered if it was Mrs. Harker's presence which had touched some chord within his memory, or if this new phase was simply spontaneous, or in any way due to her unconscious influence. She must have some rare gift or power. We continued to talk for some time, and seeing that he was seemingly quite reasonable, she ventured, looking at me questioningly as she began, to lead him toward his favourite topic. I was again astonished, for he dressed himself to the question with the impartiality of the completest of sanity. He even took himself as an example when he mentioned certain things. Why, myself am an instance of a man who had a strange belief. Indeed, it was no wonder that my friends were alarmed, and insisted on me being put under control. I used to fancy that life was positive and perpetual entity, and that by consuming a multitude of living things, no matter how low in the scale of creation, one might indefinitely prolong one's life. At times I held the belief so strongly, I actually tried to take human life. The doctor here will hear me out that on one occasion I even tried to kill him, for the purpose of strengthening my own vital powers by the assimilation within my body of his life through the medium of his blood, relying of course upon the scriptural phrase, for blood is the life. Though indeed the vendor of a certain nostrum has vulgarized the truism to the very point of a contemptuous. Isn't that true, doctor? I nodded in my assent, for I was amazed that I hardly knew what to either think or to say. It was hard to imagine that I had seen him eat up his spiders and flies not only 5 minutes before. Glancing at my watch, I saw that I should be going soon to the station to meet Van Helsing, so I told Miss Harker that it was soon time to leave. She came at once, after saying pleasantly to Mr. Renfield, "Goodbye, and I hope I may see you often, under auspicious pleasantries to yourself." To which, to my own astonishment, he replied, "Oh, goodbye, my dear, and I pray to God that I never see your sweet face again, for he may bless and keep you." When I went to the station to meet Van Helsing, I left the boys behind me, for poor Art seemed more cheerful than he had been since Lucy first took to the ill, and Quincy was more like his own brilliant self than he had been for many a day. Van Helsing stepped from the carriage with the eager nimbleness of a boy. He spotted me at once and rushed up to me. "Ah, friend Jonathan, how goes all? Well, so I have been busy, for I come here to stay if need be. All affairs are settled with me, and I have much to tell. Matamina is with you? Yes, and her so fine a husband. Arthur, my friend Quincy, they are with you as well? Good, good." As I drove to the house, I told them what had passed, and how my own diary had come to be of some use through Mrs. Harker's suggestion, at which the professor interjected upon me. "Ah, that wonderful Matamina. She has a man's brain, a brain that a man should have were he much gifted, and a true woman's heart. The good God fashioned her for a purpose, believe me, when he made that so good a combination. Friend John, up to now fortune has made that woman of help to us, but after tonight she must not have to do with this so terrible affair. It is not good that she run the risk so great. We are men both determined, nay, even pledged, to destroy this monster. But it is no part for a woman. Even if she be not harmed, her heart may fail her in so much and in so many of the horrors. Hereafter she may suffer, both in waking, from nerves, and in sleep from dreams. And besides, she is both young and not so long married. There may be other things to think of for some time, if not for now. You tell me that she has wrote all, then she must consult upon us. But tomorrow she will say goodbye to this work, and we go on alone. I agreed heartily with this, and when I told him what we had found upon his absence, that the house which Dracula had bought was the very one next to my own, he was amazed, and a great concern seemed to come upon him. "Oh, that we had known this before," he spoke, "for then we might have reached him in time to save our poor Lucy. No, however, the milk that is spilt cries not out afterwards, as they do say. We shall not think of that. We must go on our way to the end." Then he fell into a deep silence that lasted till we entered my own gateway. Before he went on to prepare for dinner, he spoke to Miss Harker. "I am told, Madamina, by my friend John, that you and your husband have put up in exact order all things that have been up unto this very moment." Well, not up to this moment, Professor," she said impulsively, "but up to this very morning." "But why not so up to now? We have seen hitherto how good all of the little things and lights have made. We have told all of our secrets, and yet no one who is told is the worse for it." Miss Harker then blushed, and taking a paper from her pocket, spoke. "Dr. Van Helsing, you will read this, and you will tell me if it must go in. It is my own record of today. I too have seen the need of putting down at present everything, however the trivial. But there is little in this except for what is personal. Must it go in?" The professor took the papers and read it over most gravely. Handing it back, he spoke again. "It need not go in if you do not wish it, but I pray that it may. It can but make your husband love you all the more, and us, your friends, more honor unto you, as well as more esteem." She took it back with another blush and a bright smile. "And so now, up to this very hour, all the records we have are completed and within the order. The professor took away one of the copies to study for after the dinner, and before our meeting, which was fixed for 9 o'clock. The rest of us has read everything, so when we met in the study, we shall all be informed as to the facts, and can arrange our plan of battle with this terrible and mysterious of ancient enemies." Mina Harker's Journal, 30th of September. When we met in Dr. Seward's study, 2 hours after dinner, which had been at 6 o'clock, we unconsciously formed a sort of board or committee. Professor Van Helsing took the head of the table, to which Dr. Seward motioned him as he came into the room. He made me sit next to him upon his right, and asked me to act as the secretary. Jonathan sat next to me, and opposite us were Lord Godalming, Dr. Seward, and Mr. Morris, Lord Godalming being next to the professor, and Dr. Stewart in the centre. The professor then spoke. "I may, I suppose, take it that we are all acquainted with the facts that are upon these papers." We all expressed assent, and he went on. "Then it were, I think, good that I tell you something of the kind of enemy with which we have to deal. I shall then make known to you something of the history of this man, which has been ascertained upon me. So then we can discuss how we shall act, and can take our measures accordingly. There are such beings as the vampire. Some of us have evidence that they exist, even had we not the proof of our own unhappy experiences. The teachings and the records of the past give proof enough for the sane people. I admit that first I was even a skeptic, were it not that through the long years I have trained myself to keep an open mind. I could not have believed, in such a time as that fact, the thunder in my ear screamed, See, see, I prove, I prove. Alas, had I known at the first what I know now, nay, had I even guessed at them, one so precious a life would have been spared the many of us who did love her. But that is gone now, and we must get to work, that other poor souls perish not whilst we can save them. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee when they are stung once. He is only now stronger, and being a being of stronger, we have much power to work against his evil. This vampire which is among us is of himself so strong in person as that of 20 men. He is of cunning more than any mortal, for his cunning be the growth of the ages, and he have still the aids of his necromancy, which is, as his etymology replies, the divination of the dead, and all the dead that he can come nigh to are for him to command. He is a brute, and more than a brute, he is a devil in callous, and the heart of him is not. He can, within limitations, appear at will when and where, and at any of the forms that are to him. He can within his range direct the elements of the storm, the fog, and the thunder. He can command all the meaner things, the rat, the owl, the bat, the moth, the fox, and the wolf. He can grow and become small. He can at times vanish and become unknown. How then are we to begin our strike to destroy him? How shall we find his where? And having found it, how can we then destroy? My friends, this is much. It is a horrible task that we now undertake, and there may be consequences to make the brave shudder. If we fail in this, our fight, he would surely win, and then where end we? Life is nothing. I heed him not, but to fail here is not certainly mere life or death, but it is that we become as him, that we henceforth become the foul things of night like him, without a heart, without conscience, preying upon the bodies and the souls that we must once loved the best. To us forever are the gates of heaven shut. Who shall open them to us again? We go on for all time abhorred, a blight upon the face of God's sunshine, and an arrow in the side of him who died for man. But we are face to face with duty, and in such case must we shrink? For me I say no, but I am old, and life with his sunshine, his fair places and his songs of birds, his music and his love are behind me. You are young. Some of you have even seen sorrow, but there are fair days yet in store for us. What say you? Whilst he was speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. I feared, oh so much, that the appalling nature of our danger was overcoming him, but when I saw his hand stretch out, but it was life to me to feel his touch, so strong, so reliant, and so resolute. A brave man's hand can speak for itself. It does not even need a woman's love to hear its music. When the professor had done his speaking, my husband looked into my eyes, and I returned into his. There was no need for speaking between us. I answer for Malone and myself, he said. Count me in, Professor, said Mr. Quincy Morris, laconically as usual. I am with you, said Lord Godalming, for Lucy's sake, if for no other reason. Dr. Seward simply nodded. The professor then stood up, and after laying his golden crucifix upon the table, he held out his hand upon either side. I took his right, Lord Godalming his left, Jonathan held my right with his left and stretched across to Mr. Morse, so we all took hands, our solemn compact made. I felt my heart become icy cold, but it did not occur to me to draw back. We resumed our places, and Dr. Van Helsing went on with a sort of cheerfulness which showed that the serious work had begun. It was to be taken gravely, and in as business-like a way as any other transaction of life. "Well, you know what we have to contend against, but we are not without our strengths. We have on our side the power of combination, a power denied to the vampire. We have the source of science. We are free to act. We are free to think. And the hours of the day and the hours of the night are ours both in equality. In fact, so far as our powers extend, they are unfettered. We are free to use them. We have self-devotion, and in an end to achieve, which is not a selfish one. For these things are much. Now let us see how far the general powers arrayed against us are restricted, and how the individual cannot. In fine, let us consider the limitations of this vampire, and of this one deeply in particular. All we have to go upon are traditions and superstitions. These do not at the first appear to be much, when the matter is one of life and death, nay, of more even than simple life or death. But yes, we must be satisfied. In the first place, because we have to be. No other means is of our control. And secondly, because after all these things, tradition and superstition are everything. This does not apply in belief in vampires, the rest for others, though not, alas, for us upon them. A year ago, which of us would have ever received such a possibility in the midst of our own scientific, skeptical, matter-of-fact 19th century life? We even scouted a belief that we saw justified under our own and very eyes. Take it, then, that the vampire and the belief in his limitations and his cure rest for the moment upon the same base. For let me tell you, he is known everywhere that men have been. In Greece, in Rome, he flourished in Germany, in France, and in India, even upon the Chinese and in China, so far from us in all ways. There even is he, and the peoples fear him to this day. He had followed the wake of the berserker Icelander, the devil-begotten Hun, the Slav, the Saxon, the Magyar. So far, then, we have all we may act upon, and let me tell you that very much of the beliefs are justified by what we have seen in our own and so unhappy inexperience. The vampire doth live on, and cannot die by mere passing of the time. He can flourish when that he can fatten upon the blood of the living. Even more, we have seen amongst us that he can even grow stronger, yet his vital facilities grow strenuous, and seen so though they refresh themselves when his spectacle problem is empty. But he cannot flourish without his diet. He eats not as others. Even friend Jonathan, who lived with him for weeks, did never see him eat. Never. He throws no shadow. He makes in the mirror no reflection, as again our Jonathan had observed. He has the strength of many of us had, witnessed again Jonathan when he shut the door against the wolves, and when he helped him from the diligence too. He can transform himself to a wolf, as we gather from the ship arrival in Whitby, when he tear upon the dog. He can be as a bat, as Madam Mina saw him upon the window at Whitby, and as friend John saw him fly from this so near a house, and as my friend Quincy saw him at the window of poor Miss Lucy. He can come in mist, which he create. That noble ship's captain proved him of this, but from what we know, the distance he can make his mist is limited, and it can only be around himself. He came on moonlight rays, as elemental dust, as again Jonathan saw those sisters in the castle of Dracula. he became so small. We ourselves saw Miss Lucy, ere she was at peace, slip through a hair-breadth space upon the tomb door. He can, when once he find his way, come out from anything, or into anything, no matter how close it be bound, or even fused up with fire, or solder, as you call it. He can see in the dark. No small power this, in a world which is one half shut from the light. But hear me through. He can do all these things, yet he is not free. Nay, he is even more prisoner than the slave of the galley, than the madman in his cell. For he cannot go where he lists. He is not of a nature as of yet to obey some of nature's laws. Why, he know not. He may not enter anywhere upon the first, unless there be someone of the household who bid him to come. Though afterwards he can come and go upon as he pleases. His power ceases, as does that of all evil things, at the coming of the day. Only at certain times can he have limited freedom. If he be not at the place where he is bound, he can only change himself at noon, at exact sunrise, or at exact sunset. These things are we told, and in this record of ours we have proof by inference. Thus, whereas we can do as we will within his limit, when he have his earth home, his coffin home, and his hell home, the place unhallowed, as we saw when he went upon the grave of the suicide at Whitby. Still at other times he can only change when the time come. It is said, too, that he can only pass running water upon the slack or the flood of the tide. Then there are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as the garlic that we know of. And as for things sacred, as this own symbol, my crucifix, that was amongst us even now when we resolve. To them he is nothing, but in their presence he take his place far off, and silent with respect. There are others, too, which I shall tell you of, lest in our seeking we may need them. The branch of the wild rose on his coffin keep him that he move not from it. A sacred bullet fired in the coffin kill him, so that he become true dead. And as for the stake through him, we already know of its peace, or the cut-off head that giveth rest. We have seen it with our eyes. Thus, when we find the habitation of this man that was, we can confine him to his coffin and destroy him. If we obey what we know, but he is clever. I have asked my friend Arminius of Budapest University to make this record, and from all the means that are, he tell me of what he has been. He must indeed have been the VIII Dracula, who won his name against the Turk, over the great river on the very frontier of Turkeyland. If it be so, then was he no common man, for upon this time and for centuries after, he is spoken of as the cleverest and the most cunning, as well as the bravest of the sons of the land beyond the forest. That mighty brain and that iron resolution which went him to his grave, and are even now arrayed against us. The Draculias are, says Arminius, a great and a noble race, though now and again were scions who were held by their covels to have had dealings with the evil one. They learned his secrets upon the Scholomance, amongst the mountains over Lake Amanst, where the devil claims the 10th scholar as his due. In the records are such words as Tragotia, Ordog, and Poker, Satan, hell, and witch, and in one manuscript this very Dracula is spoken of as a vampire, which we all understand too well. There have been from the loins of this very once great man and good woman, and their graves make sacred the earth, where alone this foulness can dwell. For it is not the least of its tares that this evil thing is noted deep in all good, in soil barren of holy memories. It cannot rest. Whilst they were talking, Mr. Morse was looking steadily at the window, and he now got up quietly, went out of the room. There was a little pause, and the professor went on. And now we must settle what we do. We have here much data, and we must proceed to lay about our campaign. We know from this inquiry of Jonathan that from the Council to Whitby come 50 boxes of earth, all of which were delivered at Carfax. We also know that at least some of those boxes have been removed, for it seems to me that our first step should be to ascertain whether all the rest remain in the house beyond the wall, where we look today, or whether any more have been removed. If the latter, we must trace. Here we were interrupted in a startling way. Outside the house came the sound of a pistol shot. The glass of the window was shattered with a bullet, which, ricocheting from the top of the embrasure, struck the far wall of the room. I am afraid I am at heart a coward, for I shrieked out. The men all jumped to their feet, and Lord Godalming flew over to the window and threw up the sash. As he did so, we heard Mr. Morse's voice without. "Sorry, all. I fear I've alarmed you. I shall come in and tell you about it." A minute later he came in and said, "It was an idiotic thing of me to do, and I ask your pardon, Miss Harker, most sincerely. It was an idiotic thing of me to do, and I ask your pardon, Miss Harker, most sincerely." Texan accent, Texan accent. "It was an idiotic thing of me to do, and I ask your pardon, Miss Harker, most sincerely. I fear I must have frightened you terribly. But the fact is that whilst the professor was talking, there came a big bat, and it sat upon the window. I had got such a horror of the damned brutes from recent events, I cannot stand them, and I went out to have a shot, as I have been doing late of evenings, whenever I see one. You used to laugh at me for it then, Art." "Did you hit it?" asked Dr. Van Helsing. "I don't know. I fancy not, for it flew away into the wood." Without saying any more, he took his seat, and the professor began to resume his statements. "We must trace each of these boxes. When we are ready, we must either capture or kill this monster in his lair, or we must, so to speak, sterilize his earth, so that no more he can seek safety within it. Thus, in the end, we may find him in his form of man between the hours of noon and sunset, and engage with him when he is at his most weakness. Now for you, Madam Mina. This night is the end, until all will be well. You are too precious for us to have such a risk. When we part tonight, you are no more must question, and we shall tell you all in good time. We are men, and we are able to bear this, but you must be our star, you must be our hope, and we shall act all the more free that you are not in our dangers, such as we are." All the men, even Jonathan, seemed relieved at this. It did not seem to me good that they should brave danger, and perhaps lessen their safety, strength being the best safety, through care of me. But their minds were made up, and though it is a bitter pill for me to swallow, I explained nothing, save to accept their care for me. Mr. Morse resumed the discussion. "As there is no time to lose, I vote we have a look at his house right now. Time is everything with him, and swift action on our part may save another victim." I own that my heart began to fall more with me when the time for action came so close. I did not say anything, for I had a great fear that if I appeared as a drag or a hindrance, they might even leave me out of the councils. They have now gone off to Carfax, which means to get into the house. Manlike, they had told me to go to bed and to sleep, as if a woman can sleep when those she loves are within danger. I shall lie down, close my eyes and pretend, lest Jonathan have any added anxiety about me when he does return. Dr. Seward's Diary, 1st of October, 4 a.m. Just as we were about to leave the house, an urgent message was brought to me from Renfield to know if I would see him at once, as he had something of the utmost importance to speak to me. I told the messenger that I would attend to his wishes upon the morning, and I was busy, to which the attendant added, "He seems very important, sir. I have never seen him so eager. I do not know but what, if you don't see him soon, he may have one of his most violent fits." I knew the man would not have said this without some cause, so I spoke. "All right, I will go now, and I ask the others to wait just a few minutes for me as I go to see my patients." "Take me with you, friend John," spoke the professor. "His case in your diary does interest me, and it has bearings, too, now and again upon our case. I should much like to see him, especially when his mind is disturbed." "May I come also?" asked Lord Godalming. "Me too," said Quincey Morris. "May I come?" Then spoke Harker as well, and I nodded, and we all went down to the passage together. We found Renfield in a state of considerable excitement, but for some ration in his speech and manner I had never seen. He was an unusual understanding of himself, which was unlike anything that I had ever met with in a lunatic, and he took it for granted that his reasons would prevail, and that the others were entirely sane. We all four went within the room, but none of the others at first spoke anything. His request was that I would at once release him from the asylum and send him upon his way. This he backed up with arguments regarding his complete recovery, and adduced his own existing sanity. "I appeal to your friends," he said. "They will perhaps not mind sitting in judgment upon my case. By the way, you have not introduced us." I was so much astonished, and the oddness of introducing a madman in an asylum did not strike me upon the moment. Besides, there was a certain dignity in this man's manner, so much of the habit of equality, that I had once made these introductions. Lord Godalming, Professor Van Helsing, Mr. Quincey Morris. This is Mr. Renfield. He shook hands with each of them, speaking in turn. "Lord Godalming, I had the honour of seconding your father at the Windham. I grieve to know by your holding of the title that he is now no more. He was a man loved and honoured by all who did know him, and in his youth was, I heard, the inventor of the burnt rum punch, much patronised upon by Derby Knight. Mr. Morris, you should be proud of your great state of Texas. Its reception into the Union was precedent which may have far-reaching effects hereafter, when the pole and the tropics may hold alliance to the stars and stripes. The power of treaty may yet prove a vast engine of enlargement, when the Monroe Doctrine take its true place as political favour. What shall any man, any of his pleasure to meeting of Van Helsing? Sir, I make no apology for dropping all forms of conventional prefix. When an individual has revolutionized therapeutics by his discovery of the continuous evolution of the brain matter, conventional forms are most unfitting, since they would seem to limit him to one of a class. You gentlemen, who by nationality, or by heredity, or by the profession of the natural gifts, are fitted to hold your respective places in the moving world, I take to witness that I am as sane as at last the majority of men, who are in full possession upon their liberties, and I am sure that you, Dr. Seward, humanitarian and medico-jurist, as well as scientist, will deem it a moral duty to deal me as one to be considered as under exceptional circumstances. He made his last appeal with a courtly air of conviction, which was not without its own deep charm. I think we were all staggered. For my own part, I was under the conviction, despite my knowledge of the man's character and history, that his reason had been restored. and I felt under a strong impulse to tell him that I was satisfied as to his sanity, and would see about the necessary formalities for his release upon the morning. I thought it better to wait, however, before making so grave the statement, for of old I knew the sudden changes to which this particular patient was most liable. I contented myself with making a general statement that he appeared to be improving much rapidly, that I would have a longer chat with him upon the morning, and would then see that I could do in the direction of meeting upon his wishes. This did not at all satisfy him, for he spoke most quickly. But I fear, Dr. Seward, that you hardly apprehend me wish. I desire to go home at once, here, now, this very hour, at this very moment. If I may, time doth press upon me, and in our implied agreement that the old Sithman, it is of the essence of the contract. I am sure it is only necessary to put before so admirable a practitioner as Dr. Seward so simple, yet so monumentous a wish, to ensure upon its fulfilment. He looked at me most keenly, and seeing the negative within my face, turned to the others. He scrutinized each of them closely, not meeting any a sufficient response. He then went on. It is possible that I have erred in my supposition. You have, I said frankly. At the same time as I felt brutally, there was a considerable pause. Then he spoke more slowly. Then I suppose I must only shift my ground of request. Let me ask then for a concession, or boon, privilege, whatever you will. I am content to implore upon in such a case, not upon personal grounds, but for the sake of others. I am not at liberty to give you the whole of my reasons, but you may, I assure you, take it from me that they are good ones, sound, and unselfish, and spring from the highest sense of duty. Could you look, sir, into my heart, you would approve to the full the sentiments which do animate me. Nay, more, you would count me amongst the best and truest of your own friends. Again he looked at us all keenly, and I had a growing conviction that the sudden change of his entire intellectual method was but yet another form or phase of his deep madness, and so determined to let him go upon a bit longer, knowing from experience that he would, like all lunatics, give himself away in the end. Van Helsing was gazing upon him with a look of utmost intensity, his bushy eyebrows almost meeting with the fixed concentration of his look. He spoke to Renfield in a tone which did not surprise me upon the time, but only when I thought back of it, for it was as one addressing an equal. Can you not tell frankly your real reason for wishing to be free tonight? I will undertake that if you will satisfy even me, a stranger, without prejudice, and with the habit of seeing with an open mind, Dr. Seward will give you, at his own risk and upon his own responsibility, the privilege you do seek. He shook his head sadly, and with a look of poignant regret upon his face, the professor went on. Come, sir, bethink yourself. You claim the privilege of reason upon the highest degree, and since you seek to impress upon us with your complete reasonableness, do this, whose sanity we have no reason to doubt, since you are not yet released from the medical treatment for this very deficit. If you will not help us within our effort to choose the wisest of course, how can we perform the duty which you yourself put upon us? Be wise, help us, and if we can, we shall aid you to achieve your wish. He still shook his head as he spoke. Dr. Van Helsing, I had nothing to say. Your argument is most complete. If I were free to speak, I should not hesitate a moment. But I am not my own master in this matter. I can only ask you to trust me. If I am refused, the responsibility of consequences does not rest with me. I thought it was now time to end the scene, which was becoming too comically grave. I went towards the door, simply saying, Come, my friends, We have work to do. Good night." As, however, I got near the door, a new change came over the patient. He moved towards me quickly, and for the moment I feared that he was about to make another homicidal attack. My fears, however, were groundless, for he held up his two hands imploringly, and made his petition in a moving manner, as he saw that the very excess of his emotion was militating against him. By restoring us more to our old relations, he became still more demonstrative. I glanced back at Van Helsing, and saw my conviction reflected in his eyes. I became a little more fixed upon my manner, if not more stern, and motioned to him that his efforts were unavailing. I had previously seen something of the same constantly growing excitement in him when he had to make some request of which at the time he had thought much, such, for instance, as when he wanted a cat, and I was prepared to see the collapse into the same solid acquiescence upon this occasion. My expectation was not realized, for when he found that his appeal would not be successful, he got into a frantic condition. He threw himself upon his knees, held up his hands, and wringing them in a plaintive supplication, poured forth a torrent of entreaty, with the tears rolling down his cheek, and his whole face and form an expression of his deepest emotion. "Let me entreat you, friend Dr. Stewart, let me implore you, to let me out of this house at once. Send me away how you will, and where you will. Send keepers with me, with whips and chains. Let them take me in a strait waistcoat, manacled, leg ironed, even do a go, but let me go out of here. You don't know what to do by keeping me here. I am speaking from the depths of me heart, me very soul. You don't know whom you wrong, or how. I may not tell, for woe is me, I may not tell. But by all you hold sacred, by all you do hold dear, by who you love that is lost, and by your hope that lives, for the sake of the Almighty, take me out of this. Save my soul from the guilt. Can't you hear me, man? Can't you understand? Will you ne'er learn? Don't you know that I am sane, and I am most earnest? I am no lunatic. I am no man in a mad filth, but a sane man, fighting for his very soul. Hear me. Let me go. Let me go." I thought that the longer this went on, the wilder he would get, and so he would bring upon a fit. I took him by the hand and raised him up. "Come," I said sternly, "no more of this. We have had quite enough. Get to your bed and try to behave more discreetly." He stopped, and he looked at me intently for several moments. Then, without a word, he rose, and he sat down upon the side of the bed. The collapse had finally come, as on all the former occasions, just as I had expected. When I was leaving the room, the last of our party, he said to me in a quiet, well-bred voice, "You will, I trust, Dr. Seward, do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you of this tonight."